I was slow to pick this up, but having got through the first episode of the Netflix series KAOS, I became obsessively delighted and full of sadness that it got canceled. Honestly, by making this video, I'm kind of hoping to goad Netflix into renewing this for at least one more season, ideally all three, which was the initial hope of the KAOS creators. The premise of Netflix's KAOS is pretty clearly laid out in the trailers. It's a reimagining of the ancient Greek pantheon in a fictive modern day setting identified as Crete with a K. Not Crete, the Mediterranean island, but clearly a shout out. Setting the story in a fictive version of Crete allows for an easy crossover between mortal and immortal worlds, involving a version of the well known King Minos and the Minotaur. Also incorporates the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. I'm not giving any spoilers on that point of the basic premise, but this discussion will absolutely contain spoilers, and in my opinion, the twists and surprises are a key point of delight in KAOS. So if you've not already watched and would like to do so fresh, I'd recommend coming back to this video after the fact. A couple of general content warnings for the show overall. There is some pretty grisly violence, which is mostly implied rather than shown in full. We get a lot of genteel cutaways. And there is some sexual content, both hetero and same sex, all of which feels pretty appropriate to the violent and sex heavy characters of ancient Greco Roman mythology. So for me, it's not gratuitous. And with that said, I judge it borderline appropriate for older teens, not so much for tweens or little kids, in my opinion, as a non parent. I want to talk for a few minutes about Zeus, Jeff Goldblum, and The Trace. A few other online commentators have complained that Jeff Goldblum's role here is a standard Jeff Goldblum and doesn't bring anything new. I'll own that I'm not a Jeff Goldblum stan, so this doesn't really affect me either way. I might have seen the first Jurassic Park once, like in the theater maybe. If it weren't for Wikipedia, I wouldn't even have remembered that he was in it. Anyway, I thought he was great as Zeus, but I would like to add another thought to the insufficiently different critique. And I'll bring in a bunch of other stuff, of course. I would argue that one of the really interesting and enriching things about casting really well-known actors is the trace that they bring with them into the role. In the case of KAOS, Goldblum is certainly the most commercially successful actor across the series. His trace, therefore, is far more universal than that of the other actors, many of whom are well known to very niche audiences, but maybe less so across the Anglophone world. For me, almost the entire cast was largely unfamiliar. Eddie Izzard's lackey is the strong exception, and with such a powerful presence, notes of Cake or Death and Death Star Canteen filled the bottom of my conscious memory as I watched her dominate the scene. As one of the most high-profile trans performers of the 90s, someone who ostentatiously flouted convention well before family-friendly drag brunches or story hours, Izzard does have a social role that exudes prescience. His very identity feels profoundly ahead of its time. But beyond that, her comedy has always been infused with acerbic social critique. And I can't help but wonder, if Izzard weren't so obviously next level smart and so good at what she does, would her identity have been accepted, even to the extent that it was at the time? But back to my point, all of this baggage attached to Izzard's own history as a comedian, as a social critic, as an unapologetic, very high profile drag performer working well outside a niche audience, this all carries over into her role as lackey, or lachesis for long. The sense of prophecy and inevitability inherent to the role of a fate is enhanced by Izzard's casting. For me, as a viewer, Izzard's trace is far more potent than Goldblum's. What was more powerful re Zeus was Goldblum's exquisite styling and the way that he fully worked it. From the tracksuits to the digital gold watch to his boxy cordless phones, Goldblum's Zeus is a perfect 1980s rich guy Hollywood icon. His accessories are so dated that even the boomers I know have the updated versions of this stuff. This really underscores Zeus as a ruler in full decline. He's failing to keep up, yet when his own ignorance rears up and presents itself, Zeus becomes enraged, blaming others. And this seems like a pretty common reaction for people faced with cognitive dissonance, that rather than examining their own assumptions or actions, it's easier to point outwards. Further, when this happens with people who have a lot of social power and are invested in the old order, this reaction can have very real, very dangerous consequences for those around them. Over the course of the season, we watch Zeus slowly become completely undone, but we're also given to understand that there's been a lot of manipulation going on in his immediate circle. Hera has been nurturing a dependency on his part, deliberately stoking his ego while keeping him obviously muffled from the reality of his own growing folly and inanity. The earnest use of unapologetically 80s costume and prop design visually reinforces this fuddy, backward quality in Zeus, who ironically fears above all that he's aging and on the point of becoming irrelevant. Dressed in white athleisure, we see him strolling around his manicured gardens, navel-gazing most of the time. In this, he might easily be a 1980s Hollywood satire of wealth and privilege. And here we have the second big thing that I love about KAOS. It's not just dealing with an ancient Greco-Roman set of stories, it pulls freely and gleefully from any number of contemporary cultural icons. The Easter eggs here are legion, and they are spectacular. I already hinted at this when I mentioned the Jeff Goldblum Eddie Izzard casting, that each of them would bring their own traces with them, depending on the viewer. But it's worth mentioning, too, that almost all the other cast members are extremely well known in their own niche fields. It might be stage acting, or New Zealand, or British murder mysteries. Likewise, the little side references within the story might emerge differently and delightfully to each viewer, depending on what kind of media, literature, music, etc. we each consume. So, for example, for me, the first moment that really stuck out as a quippy side reference was in the video shown during the River Styx ferry ride. Hades cheerfully concludes,
"Everything's going to be okay,"
harking back to the iconic first scene of The Good Place, another tongue-in-cheek series about the afterlife. Seen in context, Hades' weakly delivered message is certainly a foreshadowing for what's to come in KAOS as well, because we learn several episodes later that, as with The Good Place, Asphodel's promise of renewal is a complete hoax. All of humanity is headed for a very bad place indeed. Certainly, I can't catch all the Easter eggs. As mentioned, we all bring our own set of knowledge to our experience as an audience. And for me, KAOS offers such an incredibly rich text as to allow it to contain multitudes. For me, these kinds of shows that speak across audiences are maybe what elevates a work to a masterpiece. So I'll just mention one more for now and be on my way. The role of King Minos was played by Stanley Townsend, the same actor who played Commandant J-Hold Beehaz in the 2022 Star Wars series Andor. This matters because I think Andor and KAOS have similar target audiences, even more than with The Good Place. Both deal with the fantastical realm with a massive ensemble cast and multiple storylines, with existential questions addressed via speculative fiction. Townsend's Andor role is a similarly pompous, self-absorbed, cruel authority figure. They even have vaguely similar costumes, and have clearly made a series of life choices that directly result in the misery of their own families. So, for me, that's fun to think about. Commandant Beehaz is beholden to the Ascendant evil empire for his authority, and Minos is beholden to the Olympian gods. This lightly reinforces the idea that the gods in KAOS are themselves like an evil empire. But enough with this Easter egging, I will move on. I want to spend a little time with Dionysus, who anyone who's gotten this far in this video probably already knows is the god of revelry and wine and assorted related things. I was pretty surprised that KAOS chose to make him such a key character because I've always thought of him as a fairly minor figure in the Greco-Roman pantheon, known as Bacchus among the Romans. His most common origin stories portray him as half-mortal, sometimes known as twice-born because he was delivered premature in an attempted murder by Hera. So his implicit connection with rebirth or reincarnation is obvious. Dionysus is most frequently portrayed as one of Zeus's many children gestated by a human, and his status as half-mortal automatically demotes him to a second-tier deity. There are other ancient origin stories and interpretations of Dionysus. He's actually a pretty complicated figure, but I'll come back to all of that in a sec. As a 16th century European art specialist, I'm pretty used to seeing Dionysus portrayed a bit negatively, such as in this jaundiced figure by Caravaggio, the so-called sick Bacchus, or the dubious triumph of Bacchus as shown by Velázquez for the gleeful classist mocking among 17th century royalty. Also, as a white American, there's a lot of the puritanical in my social understanding of drinking alcohol. I can hear all the tut-tutting and head shaking about escapism or loss of control that comes alongside consumption of mind-altering substances. Curiously, we don't see Dionysus himself over-imbibing or even consume much food or drink at all, though we do learn that he enjoys a heart-shaped lolly and has a weakness for cheese pastry. On the other hand, we certainly see Zeus consuming meander water with incessant dependency. And I'm going to give Goldblum a hat tip for the way he physically conveys that sense of reliance. So, centering Dionysus is a really curious narrative choice. In the first episode, he's easy to write off as the avatar of a spoiled rich kid. We certainly are led to think of him like this by the way that he's framed. He's silly, he's self absorbed, he's just now realizing that constant partying is ultimately kind of boring, and he's that asinine trust fund Nepo baby who seeks advice from the food truck owner, probably without ever paying him for the advice or the sandwich. It's easy to mock early chaos Dionysus, but there's something a bit universal about his situation. Who hasn't sought approval by an authority figure only to be rebuffed? As a show, chaos is built on twists, as arguably is all of Greco Roman lore. And one of these early twists in chaos is our own relationship to Dionysus. His slow but steady shift from a full on eye roll character to someone who might turn out to be the hero of this entire series. And I'm talking about this series as though it were going to continue because I really want it to. It should. Come on, Netflix. Pull your head out of wherever it is and renew this thing. Naban Rizwan as Dionysus is extraordinary. He has incredibly powerful body language, frequently emoting the kind of boundless energy of a child. This physicality really amplifies the sense that he, as a character, is very childlike. He's really a baby compared with the other immortals, and frequently makes self absorbed, poorly thought through decisions. But we also see several times that his heart is really in the right place. He wants to do good. He really cares about humans, even though none of the other gods do, and he's clearly trying to fit in with the elder Olympians. He even unwittingly gives Zeus a chance to update himself with the gift of the watch. As we've seen, Zeus is surrounded with all of these accoutrements from the 80s, suggesting that he too is living in a mindset from 30 or 40 years ago. The watch he refuses to part with is a Casio. This model, the A159, was originally released in 1989 in silver. The gold version is part of an A159 re release in 2009 as part of Casio's nostalgic vintage series. So there's a very strong sense of looking backwards with Zeus's attachment to this Casio. It's a literal timepiece for all lack of subtlety's sake. And we learn in the very same scene that it was given to Zeus by another of his half human born children, Heracles, or Hercules, as Zeus can't be bothered to even remember his Greco name. Heracles is a Zeus offspring who also has evidently gone no contact with his biological father. We see here that Zeus is living in the past on multiple fronts. Dionysus offers Zeus a golden, haha, opportunity to update himself with this gift of a new watch, and Zeus roundly rejects the offer, with some scorn. So, for me, this seemingly petty moment on Zeus's part is deeply emblematic of his slow collapse of power. His calcified worldview rejects the gift that Dionysus offers as surely as he rejects the wisdom Dionysus brings to Olympus. It's a pretty clear metaphor for the ubiquitous kids these days complaint of every aging population towards the youth since time immemorial. In the wise words of Selena Gomez, I guess old white guys are only afraid of colon cancer and societal change. So here's where Dionysus becomes interesting as an unexpected protagonist, maybe even hero. He's not a might is right kind of hero like Heracles or like any of the other Olympians. He's pretty slight, literally lightweight in Hera's snark, and he doesn't have the seniority of the other gods. What he has is curiosity and love for mortals. We see this most clearly when he agrees to go feed little Dennis, the kitten. So now I must talk about Dennis for a long second. Dionysus already made a small self sacrifice when he gave Lackey his stolen watch in exchange for allowing Orpheus into the underworld. Almost immediately thereafter, he agrees to feed the kitten Dennis while Orpheus goes down to Asphodel. In this pivotal scene, we see Dionysus fall for Dennis, who is admittedly adorable, and takes the kitten along with him. For the rest of the series, Dennis becomes one of Dionysus's accessories. We see them snuggling, and Dionysus clearly gets a lot of comfort from having Dennis on his person during the increasingly tense final episodes of KAOS Season 1. Zeus decries Dionysus's attachment to Dennis as unacceptably human and a source of weakness, but the key thing here lies in the name, Dennis. Dennis is an anglicized diminutive for Dionysus. When we see Dionysus caring for Dennis, what we see could be read as him nurturing his own child self, or one of his followers. Whether Dionysus is caring for an avatar of his own inner self or one of his human wards matters less than that we see Dionysus coming of age as a protector, as a caregiver. Some of the lesser known, more occult, if you will, stories of Dionysus are as a champion of freedom. As Dionysus Eleutherius, the liberator, his wine music and ecstatic dance free his followers from self conscious fear and care and subvert the oppressive restraints of the powerful. Yes, I am committing the academic cardinal sin of relying on Wikipedia. I have verified that this is an accurate statement and a legit source from a specialist in the field. Even without the reveal that Zeus has orchestrated a slow drain on all human life spark, falsely claiming a renewed life after death, it's obvious that the Olympians are pretty horrific gods. Certainly, they easily count as exercising powerfully oppressive restraints on their subjects. Zeus demonstrates his cruel disregard for human life throughout the show, most excruciatingly in the ball boy execution scene, and in his delight over manipulating nature to massacre his people. Hera cuts out the tongues of her own priestesses to empower herself and maintain their secrecy. Poseidon bullies his own protectorate, and Hades is openly lying to his entire flock, too weak-willed to do much of anything but. So, what I'm arguing here is that we're witnessing in season 1 of KAOS the rise of Dionysus into power as Zeus brings about his own demise. The last line of the fateful prophecy: the order wanes, the family falls, and chaos reigns. I think there's a key double entendre in the word chaos here. The meaning of chaos in English, the language this series is written and filmed in, differs importantly from the meaning of the ancient Greek chaos. Again, per Wikipedia, I'm willing to believe the Wikivoke on this one. As cited here, Glenn Most argues that chaos is frequently translated as its English cognate chaos. But, he goes on, that suggests to us, misleadingly, a jumble of disordered matter, whereas Hesiod's term indicates instead a gap or opening. In other words, empty space, pregnant with the possibility of something new. So when we look at this rhymey prophecy, the order wanes, the family falls, and chaos reigns. The question of what or who is chaos becomes central. Does chaos here mean the English sense of chaos, full of anarchy and disorder? Does it mean Glenn Most's sense of chaos, like a kind of vacuum of possibility, or does it mean Dionysus himself, god of freedom, of rebirth, of disorder? Because what we see here is that the existing order is unabashedly horrible. It's cruel, it's false. It revolves around a handful of powerful entities vampirically feeding themselves without regard or in intentional disregard for others. So, is this a subtle reference to current day politics across the English post colonial world? I don't find it at all subtle. It's pretty obvious. With the instantiated neoliberal order, we see party elites on all sides nestling comfortably into the status quo, secure in their wealth and good medical care. So, all in all, I thought this was a fantastically fun, rich text of a show. I made this analysis partly out of love and partly as an open letter to Netflix. Please bring it back. Yes, it's true that there were a lot of late adopters like me, but this is maybe a masterpiece. And final hat tip to the season 1 shout out to The Matrix. Love this all for you. Keep the old stories alive. My historian's heart is full, and my sly social critic side eye is engaged at so many levels. So, what did this series bring to you? Comment down below and please contact Netflix to renew. I will leave a link to do that in the show notes.